Can Deadpool save the MCU? So that's the burning question that we want to try to answer today. And spoiler alert, we will be going through what happens in the Deadpool and Wolverine movie. So if you've not seen it, you don't want spoilers, click away now. So we're going to get straight into it. I have to say that Deadpool and Wolverine has been such a massive success after such a short period of time. And it's genuinely nice to see so much excitement for an MCU movie, probably for the first time really since Endgame. Not just myself, but everybody else that I've seen and people online and people that I know all like desperately want to either go and see this film or have and loved it. So the feedback for the movie is great, the excitement for it is fantastic, and genuinely I don't think we've seen the MCU audience and fans like this pumped up since Endgame. It's also setting records and doing really well, like it's bringing in revenue. So, you know, overall, it's just been a huge success after really only just a few days since it opened. It all looks to be going in the right direction. So does this fix the MCU? Well, probably not if you look at it in the grand scheme of things, because realistically, the MCU's been a bit of a mess ever since Endgame, ever since the end of the Infinity Saga and everything that we've had since then, with the exception of like one or two things that's been all right. I wouldn't say fantastic, but all right. There's been a lot of things that have been quite bad. And looking at the slate of what we've got coming up, I mean, I don't know whether or not we're going to see Deadpool and Wolverine, either of them or both of them, again. And at the moment, all signs would suggest that we're probably not. Ryan Reynolds has come out and said that he doesn't see himself really doing it anymore. But, you know, Disney being Disney, and they'll milk it for what it's worth, and they can see that this is obviously a success and a character that they can use. So I wouldn't be surprised if we did see him come back for like team-ups or cameos or quick little appearances and things. So we've got 2 more Avengers movies coming out, and I wouldn't be surprised if he's in maybe at least one of them. It's not impossible. I'd be very surprised if he didn't appear, and I think certainly following the success of this film, there's every chance that, you know, the big wigs at Disney and Marvel Studios are going to want him there, and you know, hopefully Ryan Reynolds will, you know, agree and can do that. And similarly with the Wolverine, I would hope that Hugh Jackman could, you know, maybe just reprise that role for an Avengers movie or a team up, you know, not necessarily having to go out of his way to like do a whole new solo movie again, but certainly as a cameo and an appearance, that would still be really good. It doesn't necessarily solve the MCU. I mean, let's have a look at the slate of things that we've got coming up over the next few years. Hey, what are you doing? I'm making a video. Well, aren't you going to introduce me? So are you like Richie Pool? Is that a thing? Sure, Richie Pool. Yep, that kind of works. By the way, it is really hot today. This was a terrible idea. Okay, well, anyway, moving on. Like seriously, it is so hot. Pay attention. By the end of this video, he's going to be super, super shiny. The next release is Agatha All Along, which comes out in September in this year. And I personally have no excitement for this whatsoever. And I definitely don't see Deadpool and Wolverine coming up in this. I don't really understand the necessity for a series about Agatha. Okay, fair enough if they're maybe using this as a way to introduce like magic elements into the MCU, but that is getting completely away from what we now know to be a successful formula, if Disney and Marvel Studios didn't know it already. More grounded sort of kind of characters, a lot more edgy and darker and grittier, less childish, with, you know, more kind of mature themes and, you know, dare I say it, the gore and the action sequences and the dark humor. That I think ultimately is what Marvel fans want, along with a ton of cameos and, you know, Easter eggs and stuff that's kind of a treat for you as a comic book fan. Are we going to get that in Agatha All Along? I really doubt it. After that, we've got like a Spider-Man, I think it's an animated series that's coming up, Your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man, and I don't really know what to make of that. If it's animated, I would say it doesn't really kind of count towards any of this. I know that sounds a bit harsh, but they're kind of separate. I mean, if you look at the What If series, I absolutely detest it, so I kind of have no excitement for the Spider-Man thing at all. And if Deadpool does appear in that, or Wolverine, they're not really appearing in it because it's not live action, and at best you'd get their voices. So, you know, maybe they'll appear in an animated series, but I kind of don't really see the point of it at all, let alone whether or not Deadpool's going to be in it. The Eyes of Wakanda series, I don't know if this is still happening or not, but that was another thing that was supposed to be coming out at the end of this year. And again, if it's animated, then I just don't really care. Then we get back into the movies for next year, and Captain America Brave New World is going to be the next cinematic release. I think there's a little bit more excitement for this now that Deadpool has been really successful. There's a bit more hype and a bit more energy in the MCU and the fandom generally. But again, I don't see Captain America being something that could have an appearance from Deadpool and Wolverine in the slightest. It's a much more grounded kind of thriller espionage movie in the same way that The Winter Soldier was. So I like the fact that it's going to be a little bit more down to earth, as it were, and go along those same kind of lines and the tone that was in The Winter Soldier. It could be really good, but I don't really see it being as something that Deadpool's got any influence in whatsoever. Similarly, again, with the series that comes up after that is Daredevil Born Again. That's March 2025. Again, I don't see a place for Deadpool and Wolverine in that. I'm excited as a Daredevil fan to see it. I just hope that with the way that this has been received with Deadpool and the R-rated side of it and the action and everything else, that they stick to what was the kind of Netflix formula of having something that is a more mature show that works really, really well for Daredevil. And similarly, if the Punisher is in it, then again, you kind of need that mature tone. So, you know, the potential is there for them to get the ingredients right if they stick to what they've done so well in the past under Netflix. And if they sort of use Deadpool and Wolverine as being the formula to success, then I figure that Daredevil could have some potential, but it really depends on what they do. It could go either way. Then another movie is The Thunderbolts that comes out in 2025. Again, it's your kind of slightly more grounded. There are going to be like powered heroes in this, but it's a little bit more down to earth, very earth-based, you know, superhero team up. The team up could be good and the humor could be good. So it could sort of work with what Daredevil and Wolverine has done in terms of humor, action, grittier levels of action sequences. Whether they go down that road, I don't know. It could work, or it could be an absolute disaster. So again, it's very touch and go with this one. Later in 2025, Fantastic Four: The First Steps, as it's now got its new title. I mean, there's a lot of hype for this. It's Fantastic Four, so it's bringing in a massive, massive weight of expectation that's on it. I don't expect there to be a vast amount of cameos. I think it'll be very much more of a sort of Fantastic Four story comic based thing, which obviously won't really have Deadpool and Wolverine in it, although they are, you know, they do have the potential to kind of appear in something like that. It really depends on the story. I think at the moment I'd be more interested to see whether or not Robert Downey Jr. appears in it as Doom. I would be surprised if he didn't, at least as a kind of like a mid-credit scene or an end-credit scene, just to set him in there as being like potentially involved somehow, because it's a Fantastic Four movie, so how can you not have Doom, or at least some sort of like little Easter egg or nod or a reference, or yeah, a mid-credit scene or an end-credit scene just to kind of introduce him would be fantastic. Can Deadpool and Wolverine appear in that? I mean, it's not impossible, but I would say probably not. I think it's being filmed literally as we speak, so it's not too late for them to kind of bring in a quick cameo or something like that. Cameos and character appearances are one of the key things that's in the Deadpool and Wolverine movie that works really, really well. So, you know, I don't think they should miss opportunities to kind of throw a character in there, but Fantastic Four has enough excitement about it, I think, at the moment, though they may not need to rely on that kind of thing. But who knows? I think it's again, it could go either way. It'll depend entirely on the writing, so we'll just have to wait and see. After that comes Blade. Now, this could, in theory, have a bit of a sort of tie-in. It really depends on whether they make any reference to the fact that the original Blade actually appears in Deadpool and Wolverine. So whether there's like a little bit of a reference to it, I'd like there to be something, even if it's just like a little nod or an Easter egg or just something in there that ties in with what had happened in the Deadpool movie. But, you know, by no means is Deadpool and Wolverine saving any of this. There's certain titles in there that, you know, could potentially be really, really good. It depends on whether or not they can kind of rely on the same formula they used in Deadpool to kind of hopefully bring the MCU out of the mire. I mean, some of the stuff I've still got to go through yet is dire. So, you know, we're very touch and go. Has Deadpool and Wolverine saved the MCU? Definitely not when you look at what else is coming out. So let's look at some more. The next one in 2025 that's come up on the list here is Ironheart. Now, my problem with this is that I'm not interested in it. We've had a whole Iron Man franchise with the suits. When Ironheart appeared in the last Black Panther movie, it was incredibly underwhelming and the suit looked awful, like absolutely terrible. Like the CGI work on that was appalling. And it just doesn't look like an Iron Man related character. And the Ironheart character that we saw in Black Panther was unbelievably annoying because they were literally ripping off Tony Stark almost word for word in some scenes that she was in. You know, just copying what had previously been done. So an unnecessary reboot for a character that doesn't need rebooting, particularly as we've got RDJ coming back, you're just weighing yourself up against inevitable sort of failure, because you're going to get comparisons and it's just, I can just see it being an absolute disaster. Then we finally get to Avengers Doomsday. Now, obviously there's a lot of talk about this at the moment because that's the brand new title for the next Avengers movie. So that's May 2026. And we've now got RDJ, Robert Downey Jr. confirmed as basically he's going to be Dr. Doom or Victor Von Doom. So it's going to be interesting to see how they do it. But again, do Deadpool and Wolverine have any involvement with that? I mean, it's an Avengers movie, so it's never... You can't ever rule out the possibility that there might be a cameo or an appearance by those characters if they start to team up, but it will depend on how they do this story. And I do wonder whether, this is one of the reasons why I think that we might actually see Robert Downey Jr. appearing as Doom in the Fantastic Four film that comes out first, because otherwise, what story are you telling in Doomsday for it to actually be an Avengers movie? Why would they be teaming up unless he's already a threat? So they must surely be having to sort of like drop threads in movies that come out prior to that. RDJ has been sort of contracted to do this for a lot longer than we know. So this isn't new information, and whether or not, well, certainly for, you know, for the writers of these films. So I'd be surprised if there wasn't already some, by the time that Avengers movie comes out, there's already a threat from Doom. And because of that, you would expect at some point in that Avengers film for the sort of like the team up to start, at least start, or basically be set by the time you get to the sort of like halfway through the film. Otherwise, it's not an Avengers movie. So, you know, does Deadpool make an appearance? Does he come back? Does he get his dream wish of being an Avenger? Does he bring Wolverine with him? I mean, to have those two in with the Avengers, I know that I don't know if they're technically Avengers in the comics. I think they do make appearances with the Avengers for sure. But you know, the team up that we could have with sort of like Captain America and Hulk, maybe Thor, Captain Marvel, Doctor Strange. You know, if you stick Deadpool and Wolverine in that mix, I think you've got a much better blend of characters that work off of each other. And the great thing about Deadpool is the way that he connects with the audience through talking through the screen. He talks to the audience, he breaks the fourth wall or whatever it's called. And I just feel like if you had characters like Captain Marvel in there, Deadpool's going to absolutely ring that for every joke that it's worth. And I feel like as an MCU fan, I want to see that. So I think it would be better for having Deadpool in it. And Wolverine as well, because I feel like they balance each other out quite nicely. One who's incredibly like funny, and then the other one who's a little bit more like the character who always sits on the side and like sets the tone of being more serious and, you know, having this cowl and all the time and being really mean. So you've kind of got this nice balancing act going on between them. The chemistry works quite well. Sticking those two into then an Avengers ensemble that will have quite a variety of other characters in it. You've got to be a little bit careful, because let's never forget that if they are going to bring Scarlett Johansson back as Black Widow, well, Scarlett Johansson and Ryan Reynolds are divorced. They were married to each other once and no longer. So, you know, I don't know whether or not that's going to play on any of this. I have heard that Scarlett Johansson is reprising her role at some point. It's more likely for Secret Wars, admittedly. But this is my point. If we're not getting an Avengers team up in Avengers Doomsday, then it's not an Avengers movie. And I just feel like you've got two characters there in Deadpool and Wolverine that are now too good and too valuable to miss up the opportunity of sticking them in the Avengers. It just, to me, that's got to be done. It's like when you had Guardians of the Galaxy come out and having them interact with the Avengers in Infinity War and Endgame. That sort of coalition, if you like, of those two teams getting together was, for me, it was a personal highlight, kind of seeing that on screen, those two franchises, if you like, meeting. So we've got to have, I think, these X-Men characters meeting up with the Avengers. And I'm sorry, but if you recast Deadpool and or Wolverine, I just feel like we're going to struggle. So I think, you know, there's big question marks over this. And to me, I will be very disappointed if we don't now see Deadpool and or Wolverine appearing in that Avengers mix-up. I just think it's too good an opportunity. So, you know, can Deadpool save the MCU? It really depends on whether or not they use him again. After that on this list for 2026, we've got Vision Quest. Naturally, this is supposed to be a show, presumably for Disney Plus, based on Vision. I'm not really bothered about it. I'm not really interested in it. The character was a side character, a B character at best. I'm just not really sold by it in the slightest, so I couldn't really care less. And this is the problem. I think the whole idea of having quality instead of quantity is still somewhat questionable when you've got these awful titles coming out for what are Disney Plus shows. And this is just another one where it's, I mean, a B-list character at best, who appeared in first time in obviously Age of Ultron, and then in WandaVision, and then obviously Infinity War and Endgame between the two. But you know, he's not a character to me that requires his own show. You know, he's never had a standalone movie. I just feel like this show is being made for the sake of it. I don't really feel like the audience is clamoring for it or asking for it. So again, it's just pointless. And if they do make stuff like that, then they're not learning from Deadpool and Wolverine. They're not learning this what actually works. And this is the thing. Whether or not Deadpool and Wolverine can save the MCU depends entirely on whether or not they listen to what the audience is saying. I mean, it's there in the numbers. You can see it with how well this film has been received and how well it's performing. That's your key to success. So, you know, if you're gonna then carry on doing what you were doing before, it doesn't save the MCU in the slightest. After that, you've then got the next Avengers movie, which is Secret Wars. And again, Secret Wars is an even better opportunity to get Wolverine and Deadpool into this with Avengers, and presumably Robert Downey Jr. will be there as Doom. Fantastic Four inevitably have to be involved in this. But Secret Wars is like the big one. I would say it's a bigger movie than Doomsday. Doomsday is probably a little bit more of a setup in the way that Infinity War was for Endgame. But I think Secret Wars is the one that we're really aiming for. So that's not until 2027, so we've still got a few years yet. But again, if you're going to do Secret Wars, perfect opportunity to bring in Deadpool, perfect opportunity to bring in Wolverine, and bring back some of these like multiversal characters if you're going to have Black Widow. Similarly with other Avengers, we've obviously got like a new Captain America. There'll be, I'm sure, Captain Marvel, Doctor Strange, and inevitably some of these other heroes that turn up in these shows, Thunderbolts, you know, Daredevil. Whether or not they appear, we assume that some of them at least might do. So, you know, Secret Wars I think is very much the potential to be really good, and you've got obviously now a safe pair of hands running it in terms of the Russo brothers, but surely you've got to put Deadpool in that. I just can't imagine them not doing it. It's too good an opportunity. You'll be wasting the chance if you don't put him in there. And you know, the question, can Deadpool and Wolverine, or can Deadpool at least, save the MCU? Again, you've got to put him in there to give him the chance, because if you don't, you've had this incredible blockbuster and then you're just going to end it. You're going to just stop it right there. And I'm like, it's not usual Disney formula to do that. Usually they will milk it for what it's worth. So we've obviously had a great success with the film. Surely they've then got to use him again. Surely they've got to put Deadpool into this stuff. And it's got to be Ryan Reynolds. It can't be anybody else. And then just quickly running through the list of what we've got coming out after that, there's apparently a live-action Spider-Man sequel, potentially. Don't really know if that is happening or not. I've heard mixed things as to whether or not they will do it or not. And which version of Spider-Man now are we going to have? Presumably they're talking about Tom Holland. But, you know, ultimately, I don't really know where they can go with it. If Spider-Man, if this is coming out after Secret Wars, so, you know, is Spider-Man going to be brought back by the Avengers? I mean, they've obviously forgotten about Peter Parker, but Spider-Man is still there. And, you know, throughout all of those titles that we've gone through for the, like, what's going to be the next few years, there's nothing in there that really screams that he's going to be involved in it. Other than Avengers teams up, if they recruit him in the same way that he had been previously. I don't really see him coming up in any of those shows or movies, really, except, I mean, I'd say maybe Daredevil, but I can't see them putting Spider-Man into a show. I think it would probably have to be a movie. Captain America, therefore, not likely. Thunderbolts, not likely. Fantastic Four, maybe as a cameo, but I think that'd probably be it at best. And then you're straight into the Avengers movies. So if they do bring Tom Holland back as Spider-Man in for those, then it makes sense that they'll do what they've done previously, where inevitably follow that with a Spider-Man solo film. It's exactly what they did after Endgame, is that you had that. And similarly, in terms of the time setting and where it would be, you also had a Spider-Man movie that was set just after Civil War. So you have your big kind of Avengers team up movies where he's in them, and then you kind of round it off afterwards by having Spider-Man out on his own. Seems to be a bit of a formula that they're sticking to, and certainly looking at the list, that seems to be what they want to do again. Then we start falling down quite a lot. So you've got Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings, number 2. I'm not interested in Shang-Chi. It's one of the worst, well, not one of the worst movies that's ever been made by Marvel, but I'm really not interested. I don't like the characters. I'm not interested in the setting of it. I don't really care for them. Like, when I watched the Shang-Chi movie before, if the main character in it had sort of been beaten and defeated and died, I wouldn't have cared less. So I just don't feel any attachment to that movie whatsoever. Quite frankly, if they took that off the list, I wouldn't even notice. Armor Wars is another one, date to be confirmed. I'm not sure if they've ditched this or not. I think they might still be doing it. It could be good depending on what they do with the story. Personally, I'd like to see the Punisher involved in that big time. But whether they do it or not, I don't know. But again, look at the success that you've had with Deadpool, understand that cameos and other characters, bringing them in, make this work. And Armor Wars is a fantastic opportunity to bring in Frank Castle and stick him in an Iron Man suit. It would work. It would be brilliant on screen. So Armor Wars is a little bit questionable depending on what they do. I feel if they don't do that, then I'm probably not going to care too much. I'm not really going to be that interested if it's just basically Don Cheadle running around in an Iron Man suit. Otherwise, it's just not interesting. Wonder Man is on the list. Not a character I'm interested about. This is the problem. You're relying on a new name of a character that movie-going audiences don't know anything about. You'd have to be a very serious comic book fan to know who Wonder Man is. And so, to be honest, you're not. If you're going to carry on with a Wonder Man series, you're not sticking, or film, you're not sticking to the formula that Deadpool and Wolverine has shown you is a success. Bringing in characters you know. Deadpool and Wolverine were a reliable name, and it brings in audiences because we know who they are. If you're going to introduce something new, I just feel like you've tried it too many times now over the last few years since Endgames with new characters and you know, B-list characters and people that ultimately just letting the franchise down. So I think I'm all for doing something new, but I think we've tried doing something new and it hasn't really worked. So Wonder Man, I'd bin it. They'll inevitably do another X-Men 97 series. That's absolutely fine. Again, animated. I'm less interested in it, but I know the first season was quite successful and people really enjoyed it. So by all means do that again. Whether or not they'll tie it in story-wise with everything else, I've no idea. And then Marvel Zombies after that is another one that's TBD. So Marvel Zombies is a spin-off from What If. It would be animated. I would love for them to actually do that live action. Then I would be interested in it. So that's the list of everything that we've got over the next few years, including some that are a little bit questionable at the end as to whether they're still going to do them or not. There's no dates for them. But realistically, if we're going to answer the question, can Deadpool save the MCU? As I've said before, it really depends on whether they actually stick him into any of this. If you just stop it now and say that Deadpool and Wolverine is, I think, one of the best Marvel movies that there's been, if you just stop it right there and then it fixes absolutely nothing. It's a massive, massive band-aid over what is a leaking franchise. So I think ultimately, I don't think Deadpool and Wolverine saves the MCU. I think it just gives the MCU hope that there is a formula and that they can every now and again produce something that's good. But the problems still remain, that the titles that they've got coming out suggest that they haven't really learnt their lesson. One of the biggest things that I liked about Deadpool and Wolverine is when they make jokes at the end about the fact that really Disney and Marvel Studios should take the whole multiverse, big, massive sci-fi time traveling thing as an L, as a loss, as a defeat. Can it move on? It's just been very confusing. It hasn't really worked. We've got too many of these like deadbeat characters that no one's interested in. You know, and realistically, we've got potentially a different way of doing things now because obviously the whole Jonathan Majors has shifted things around quite a bit. So no, I don't think Deadpool and Wolverine saves anything. I think all it does is show you that there was a brilliant send-off potentially for these characters. It's only going to save the MCU if those characters come back again and we see Deadpool played by Ryan Reynolds and we see Wolverine played by Hugh Jackman coming back, particularly in those Avengers movies. Otherwise, it's a bit of a one-hit wonder, or a three-hit wonder if you count it as a trilogy. And, you know, realistically, you could reboot the whole thing. You could reboot the whole X-Men franchise from this and then start introducing them into stuff. But again, apart from say like Fantastic Four and obviously the Avengers films, I don't see a lot of wiggle room for the X-Men to suddenly start getting involved in any of this. So yeah, to me the question, can Deadpool save the MCU? I don't think so. I don't think he's going to be utilised enough, if at all. And I feel like this movie, as good as it is, and I do think it puts some hope, it does put some excitement back into the MCU, that what we hope now is that the big bosses at Disney and Marvel Studios and Kevin Feige and everybody else and all the writers listen to what the audience is saying and looking at how we're reacting, and you know, we're loving Deadpool and Wolverine. It's been a massive success. What I hope is that they take that formula and the things that they've used, tons of cameos, great characters that are thrown in there, billions of Easter eggs. The count is well over 100 now of actual Easter eggs that have been included in that movie. You know, we shouldn't really sort of have to explain to Marvel what works, because it was surely obvious after the whole Infinity Saga what was working as a success. But then they've gone and tried other things and it hasn't worked. Deadpool brings it back to what was a successful formula, and it worked not flawlessly, but brilliantly. It did really well. So yeah, it puts hope and excitement back into the MCU, as long as the big names, the big chiefs in charge, as long as they are listening to that this is the content we want to see. So does it save the MCU? No. But does it give it some hope? Yes. And on that kind of disappointment, it is time to end. So thank you very much for watching. Please leave a comment and let me know what you think. I'd love to get some more opinions on this. What do you think of Deadpool and Wolverine? Does it save the MCU? What do you think about the plans going forward for Marvel Studios? And yeah, hopefully we're in for a good ride over the next few years with the content that they've got coming up. But I do think there are some pitfalls. So with that said, we're all done, and I'll see you guys real soon.